Hello, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it. I'm going to talk to you today about the most devastating event that ever occurred to me while I was living in a beautiful, picturesque part of Australia in Colo Heights, and there's the old Upper Colo Bridge right there, and it was lovely actually. We lived there with my son and my daughter, and then the most devastating event of my life occurred. So my little boy was 10 years old, and he had experienced what I understood to be a stroke. As a school teacher, we get trained in basic first aid, so face, arms, slurred speech, telephone. And so he had all of those things, the face, the arm droop, that it was incomprehensible speech at the time. And so we took him from here in the mountains down to Hawkesbury Hospital, and by the time we got there, he was resolved. So this event was later diagnosed by Dr. Kolos in his letter to the Healthcare Complaints Commission as what's called a transient ischemic attack. The symptoms are more in keeping with transient ischemic event. And the primary cause, I'm given to understand, of those events is a cardiac issue. However, we were discharged, and I was told that what my son encountered was likely an anomaly, but we were given a letter for referral to go and have a cardiac assessment, which we did. And there was also a referral for an EEG, because I explained at the time that I thought there might be epilepsy in my family. So we went ahead and had that cardiac assessment, and during the consult, Dr. David Murphy took phone call about trades and bathroom renovation, and it's my opinion that he was not properly focused on that assessment. So 3 months later, I went to wake my son up for school, and I found a dead little boy in his bed. It was horrifying. My house was declared a crime zone. Obviously, my husband and I were implicated. And our living little girl, who was 5 at the time, just went into a complete state of shock. And it was devastating. So it was all over the national news. And there was an autopsy conducted that we didn't actually consent to. It happened in less than 24 hours of having his body taken from our home. And in that autopsy, they located a hole in my son's heart and a left ventricle that measured at 14 millimeters. So this is the cardiac component of the autopsy. There was also a brain assessment where they tried to look for evidence of epilepsy, but there was nothing. So the key findings are here. And you can see here the free wall thickness of the right ventricle measured 4 millimeters, and that of the left 14 millimeters. And then down here, foramen ovale, and that's PFO, that means a hole in the heart. So when I was issued the autopsy, I was just begging for answers. I'm just a mum. I was teaching year 11 and 12 English literature at the time. I had no idea about this world that I had now found myself in. My home was declared a crime zone. My little boy was dead, and his body, well, they did what they did. So I got in touch with the supervising pathologist. So there was a novice pathologist actually at that time named Dr. Bailey, who did what she did to my son. And this man that you can see on the screen, Joe Duflo, was the leading expert in Australia and actually wrote academic papers on sudden death in the young, and he was kind enough to send me his academic paper. I think, though, the expectation perhaps was that I wouldn't read it. Well, I did. And I got in touch with him and asked him some questions, because it occurred to me that when I did read his paper, that he insists in that paper that certain measurements should be taken, that's considered best practice. And here's what he says to me. First, in relation to the left ventricular cavity diameter, I accept this was not measured by the autopsy pathologist. But I do note that the heart was described as normal shape. There is nothing normal about a little boy dying and having a report that says one thing at echo and his echo deleted, and then missing a key measurement at an autopsy that I didn't consent to. To top it all off, as my world is crumbling, my son is dead, my family's just in a state of confusion and despair and horror, I contacted Nepean Hospital at Penrith, and I asked them if I could have a copy of my son's echocardiogram that was meant to be archived for 35 years. That's standard practice for paediatric cardiology records, and they told me that it had accidentally been deleted. Next to the deletion, as this unfurled, was login data, Dr. David Murphy. So what you can see there on the screen is from the publicly available data forensic report. You can get it under the Freedom of Information by applying to the coroner. It's available to anybody that wants to take a look. But right now, as you can see, it says there very clearly that the logged in operator was DM Default Murphy David, the name of the cardiologist that was supposed to be caring for my son. But at the coronial inquest, even though he wasn't required to attend, his business partner, Dr. Stephen Cooper, came forward and claimed that he did the deleting with David Murphy's login data. So I went to the media and explained that I just found this dreadful. 2GB covered the deletion of the records at that time. I went to Town Hall at Parramatta and spoke publicly with the Health Minister at the time, Julia Skinner. And after begging for a data forensic inquiry and not being answered, finally, after the media engagement, they decided to conduct this data forensic inquiry. What I found, my son died on the 12th. I found him on the morning of the 12th of September. And the data forensic inquiry said their finding was that the records were actually deleted on the 12th of August. Now, the 12th of August, those dates read 12.8. What I thought about over the years was that the machine was actually American, and the 8th of the 12th is the opposite in Australian dating systems. And this is where a really significant event transpires, because the 8th of the 12th is the date that I believe Dr. Murphy first becomes aware of the death of my son. So if you take a look at this document that I'll pop on the screen, you'll see a message from his secretary that says mother called on the 30th of the 11th. Now, Dr. Murphy at that time was working Thursdays at Nepean and other days at other hospitals. So he comes to Nepean Penrith on Thursday, which is the 8th of the 12th in 2011. He gets that message when I had called earlier in the week on the 30th. He gets the message on the 8th of the 12th. Now remember, the record is deleted, hypothetically, August, the 8th month, but we're saying there's a possibility that it's actually the opposite, because of the American dating system versus the Australian dating system. So if it was deleted, in fact, on the 8th of the 12th, that's after my son has died. That's the date that David Murphy first discovers that my son is dead. Now have a look what else happens on the 8th of the 12th. As far as I'm aware, there's no further interaction with my son's file aside from the initial assessment. But on the 8th of the 12th, there's a message from the secretary. Then he procures a fax from Dr. Kolos on the 8th of the 12th, asking for the initial ECG that was done at Hawkesbury Hospital. Interestingly, if you look at the top left-hand section of that image, you can see the base of 08/12/2011. So that's the date, the 8th of the 12th, 2011. And the fax is transmitted to Dr. Murphy at 12:23. Now that's very significant. These events are all happening on the 8th of the 12th, and this is the early portion of the afternoon. Now the data forensic report shows that the records were deleted at 2:58 to 3:04 with login credentials DM Default Murphy David. Now finally, David Murphy sends an internal memo, which I'm about to show you as well, to Dr. Lynette Down, the director of the neonatal intensive care unit, they shared this echocardiogram machine between the pediatrics unit and the neonatal unit, and he's written a request for the echocardiogram. So he's been advised that it's not available due to technical difficulties. That brings us to where we are now. So recently, after I put this together and thought, isn't that strange? What are the odds of the reflection of that date and looking at an Australian dating system versus an American dating system? So I contacted Lionswood data forensic investigators, who were the initial investigators, and I contacted the man responsible for that, and he sent me an email saying that essentially, yes, my hypothesis is possible and that they would go and do another investigation, but it was my task to make contact with the hospital and ask if they can have access to the echocardiogram machine that would now be over 13 years old. And additionally, the payment for this investigation, they hold the hard drive, they have the hard drive, I'm given to understand, they still have that data available to do another assessment. It's $700 an hour. So when my son died, I paid almost $200,000 in legal fees. I begged, I pleaded, I garnered the support of the Australian people to have a public inquiry. Remarkably, at that public inquiry, at the inquest, Dr. David Murphy, the doctor that was given the responsibility to investigate my little boy, my 10-year-old son's heart, and maintain his records, because that's part of their job as a physician, to maintain records. I'm a school teacher, so if I, didn't take care of my student records, there'd be some serious implication for me professionally, no doubt. But he didn't do that, and he wasn't even required to attend the coronial inquest. So what I'm asking you now, 13 years later, Australia, is very simple. Please share this video far and wide. And the reason is, I have 3 other children. Ezekiel has 2 baby brothers, full blood brothers, and his sister, who was 5 at the time of his untimely death, entirely unnecessary death in my opinion, is now a married woman. And we need the truth on the death certificate of my son. I need the truth on the death certificate of my son, because it is a human right. He is a human being. He was worth being allowed to live a full life to manhood, and that was robbed from him. And he deserves the honour in death, to have the truth on his death certificate. He deserves that. And in doing so, in telling the truth about a cardiac event that in my opinion is what happened to my son, we will protect my living children. So please make a donation to this GoFundMe page, because that money will go to Lionswood to run this investigation again, so that they can have a good look at the dates, American versus Australian dating systems. Please help me.